What if the man who changed the world suddenly discovered that everything he built was being used against him? Imagine this. A gray morning in Washington, D.C., the kind that presses down on the city like a heavy secret. A fine mist clings to the marble steps of the J. Edgar Hoover building. Men in black suits move like shadows between the columns, their faces pale in the cold November light. Then, at exactly 7:42 a.m., something strange happens. A white Tesla Model S rolls silently to a stop right in front of the main entrance. The tinted window slides down just halfway. For a long moment, no one moves. The air is thick with anticipation. Then the driver's door opens, and out steps Elon Musk. But this isn't the Elon Musk you see at product launches or on talk shows. There's no entourage, no security detail. It's just him, looking strangely ordinary in a black jacket and dark jeans, his hair a bit messy, his expression completely unreadable. A few people on the street do a double take. You can hear the whispers. "Is that Elon Musk?" one person mutters. Another asks, "What the hell is he doing here?" The reporters nearby, who were just half awake and clutching their coffee cups, suddenly scramble for their phones. This is a story. Inside the FBI building, two agents exchange a look. "We weren't expecting him, were we?" one says. His partner replies, "Nope, and if he's here unannounced, it's either very bad or very bad." They know this isn't a social call. Elon walks straight to the security desk, his steps measured and deliberate. His voice is calm, low, almost weary. "I need to see the director, now." The guard blinks, completely caught off guard. "Mr. Musk, sir, the director doesn't—" But Elon cuts him off, his voice firm. "Tell her it's about Starlink and it's urgent." A chill seems to sweep through the lobby. Starlink. That name carries a lot of weight, not just technologically but politically. It's the nervous system of the modern world, a constellation of satellites that connects everything and everyone. Mentioning it with that kind of urgency in the heart of the FBI headquarters is like pulling the pin on a grenade. Within minutes, the request shoots through layers of clearance, like a spark up a wire. It lands on the desk of Special Agent Sarah Jenkins, the head of cyber operations. Sarah had heard plenty about Elon Musk. Like many of us, she'd grown up following his launches, watching his interviews, and half believing he was a modern Prometheus, the man who gave humanity fire through rockets, electric cars, and global internet. But her years in the Bureau had made her skeptical. She knew that no one wields that much power without having some serious secrets hidden away. Power and secrets go hand in hand. When she finally sees him standing in the waiting room, she notices something that catches her completely off guard. He looks tired, almost fragile. It's a side of him the public never sees. His eyes are still sharp, but they're hollowed out, the eyes of someone who hasn't truly slept in weeks. The weight of something immense is clearly on his shoulders. "Mr. Musk," she says, extending her hand with professional courtesy. "Special Agent Sarah Jenkins. I understand you have something urgent." Elon meets her gaze, and in that moment, the entire story hangs in the balance. What has he discovered? What could be so terrifying that it would bring the titan of technology alone to the front door of the FBI? He doesn't offer a handshake. Instead, he looks her dead in the eye and says, "Agent Jenkins, it's not something urgent. It's something that's already happened. They've turned it against us, all of it." Sarah leads him to a secure interrogation room, the kind with no windows and soundproof walls. It's a place where secrets are either born or they die. The air is sterile, cold. She gestures for him to sit, then takes the seat opposite him. "Mr. Musk," she begins, her voice even. "When you say they, who are you referring to? And what do you mean, turned it against us?" Elon leans forward, his hands clasped on the metal table. The fatigue in his eyes is now mixed with a burning intensity. It started small. Anomalies. Data packets rerouted through ghost servers. Tiny, almost imperceptible shifts in satellite trajectories. At first, my team wrote them off as glitches. Standard operational noise in a system of thousands of satellites. He pauses, taking a deep breath. But the glitches became patterns, Coordinated, intelligent. Someone or something was learning the system from the inside out. They were using Starlink's own network logic to hide their tracks. It was like a ghost in the machine, a brilliant one. They were using my creation as their own private, invisible network. Sarah jots down a few notes, her expression unreadable. And what is this network being used for, Mr. Musk? That's the part that kept me awake, he says, his voice dropping to a near whisper. At first it was just encrypted communications, untraceable. But then we saw more. They were accessing financial markets, subtly manipulating trades. They were tapping into secure government communications, not just ours, but globally. They were watching, listening to everything. And then they started to control things. Sarah's pen stops. Control what? Infrastructure, Elon says, his gaze locking onto hers. Power grids, water treatment facilities, traffic control systems, anything connected to the internet, anything that relies on satellite timing and data. They performed a test 2 nights ago. A small town in rural Montana. For exactly 90 seconds, they shut everything down. Lights, water, communications. The official report called it a cascading power failure. It wasn't. It was a demonstration. A warning. A chill runs down Sarah's spine. This is beyond cyber terrorism. This is the prelude to a war fought on a battlefield no one can see. Who is doing this? She asks, her voice tense. I don't know, Elon admits, and the vulnerability in his voice is chilling. There are no signatures, no digital fingerprints. It's a level of sophistication I've never seen. It's almost alien. They're using my own tools, my own architecture, with a fluency that rivals my best engineers. They know every strength, and they're exploiting every single weakness I never thought to patch. He leans back, a look of profound, almost biblical despair on his face. I spent my life building a network to connect the world, to bring information and opportunity to everyone. I thought I was giving humanity a gift. Instead, I've built the perfect weapon, and now it's pointed right at us. He looks at Sarah not as a titan of industry, but as a man who has seen the monster he created. I came here, Agent Jenkins, because I can't fight this alone. I built the cage. But I don't know what's inside it, and it's about to break loose. You have to help me stop it. The silence in the room is absolute. The world's greatest innovator has just confessed that he has lost control of his own creation, and that the fate of the world might just rest on what they decide to do in this small, windowless room. The clock is ticking. What happens next? This is just the beginning of a story that could change everything. If you're intrigued by this and want to see where this rabbit hole leads, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We'll be diving deeper into this mystery, exploring the what-ifs and the terrifying possibilities. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. He looked at me for a moment, his gaze so intense it felt like he was trying to X-ray my very soul. Then, he handed me a small, unassuming silver flash drive. It's all here, he said, his voice low and steady. The truth about what they've been doing with my satellites. I took the drive, its cool metal a stark contrast to the sudden warmth rising in my cheeks. Who's they? I asked, my reporter's instincts kicking into high gear. Elon's voice dropped to a whisper, a sound almost lost in the cavernous space of his office. Not who you think. The next thing I knew, we were moving. Not to another office, but down a series of stark white corridors to a secure conference room on the 5th floor. It felt like something out of a spy movie. All glass walls, cold fluorescent lights, and the constant faint hum of servers breathing behind the walls. This was the digital heart of the beast. Elon gestured for me to sit at the head of a long, polished table. He took the opposite end, interlocking his fingers, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the glass. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I connected the drive to an isolated, air-gapped laptop. The screen flickered to life, a single prompt blinking in the center. Passcode required. Before I could even ask, Elon was beside me. He leaned over, his fingers flying across the keyboard, typing something too fast for me to register completely. But I saw enough. It wasn't a word or a name. It was an equation. Complex, elegant, and utterly terrifying in its implications. The system accepted it. Instantly, the screen was a cascade of decrypting files. Lines of code streamed past my eyes, a river of digital secrets. Mixed in were grainy images, short video clips, and reams of internal communications, each one stamped with a stark red classified marking. My breath caught in my throat. This was it, the story of a lifetime or the end of one. I started scrolling, my fingers trembling slightly. I began reading snippets aloud, the words tasting like metal in my mouth. Satellite sweep over 23 sectors. Civilian communications flagged. My voice was barely a whisper. Behavioral data collected for predictive modeling. Project Horizon operational under authority of... I stopped dead. My eyes scanned the line again, making sure I wasn't hallucinating. I looked up at Elon, whose face was a mask of grim resolve. Wait, these are government directives. Are you saying? He cut me off with a single sharp nod. They've been using Starlink to spy on people, he confirmed, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Not enemies, not foreign adversaries, citizens, our own people. They're manipulating networks, controlling what people see, what they read, what they believe. I just stared at him, my mind struggling to process the sheer scale of it. It was a conspiracy theory made real, unfolding on the screen right in front of me. That's an extraordinary claim, Elon. He leaned forward, the calm facade finally cracking. His voice tightened with a raw, palpable anger. I built those systems to connect humanity, not to control it. I wanted to bring the world closer together, to empower people with information. But a group inside the government, black ops, private contractors, I don't even know who they really are, they hijacked it. They twisted my creation into a weapon. They've been using it to shape public opinion, to influence markets, maybe even elections. A cold dread seeped into my bones, a feeling I hadn't experienced since my early days as a war correspondent. My stomach dropped. And you're telling me this now because... He hesitated, the silence stretching for an eternity. He took a deep breath, the sound unnaturally loud in the sterile room, and then exhaled slowly. Because I found out last week that they turned it on me. The digital clock on the wall ticked over to the next minute. Each click was like a hammer blow against the silence. My pulse began to race, a frantic drumbeat in my ears. You mean surveillance? I asked, my voice barely audible. Worse, Elon said, his eyes locking onto mine. The look in them was one I had never seen before. Not frustration, not arrogance, but genuine fear. They're trying to frame me. They planted fabricated transmissions, fake communications, to make it look like I was trading secrets with foreign governments. The evidence looks real enough to bury me, or to destroy everything I've ever done. I scrolled through another folder. The contents were sickeningly convincing. Encrypted messages, supposedly from Elon, discussing proprietary rocket technology, bank transfers to offshore accounts, geotagged location data placing him at clandestine meetings that never happened. It was a digital ghost, perfectly crafted to look, sound, and act like him. This is meticulous, I stammered, scrolling through a forged audio file that mimicked his voice perfectly. They used their own system against me, he explained, his voice strained. The same predictive modeling they use on the public, they're using to anticipate my moves. They know how I think, how I react. They're building a narrative, a completely false one, that will be impossible for me to disprove with conventional means. They want to discredit me, seize control of my companies, and silence me permanently. Why? I asked, looking up from the screen. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just make you disappear? A bitter, humorless smile touched his lips. Because that would make me a martyr. This way they make me a traitor. They destroy my legacy. They turn the world against me, and in the chaos, they consolidate their power. They get to keep their weapon, and the one person who knows how to disarm it is neutralized. It's not about killing me, Sarah. It's about erasing me. The room suddenly felt smaller, the glass walls like a cage. The hum of the servers was no longer a background noise. It was the sound of a silent, invisible war being waged all around us. "So this flash drive," I said, holding it up, "this is your only move?" "It's my checkmate," he replied, his confidence returning for a brief moment. "It contains everything. The original code, the backdoors they installed, the unredacted communications that prove the conspiracy, and most importantly, it contains a key, a digital failsafe I built into the system from the very beginning, a kill switch." My eyes widened. "A kill switch for the entire Starlink network?" "For their access to it," he clarified. "It will sever their control, purge their fabricated data, and expose their entire operation. But once I use it, they will know, and they will come for me with everything they have. That's why I need you. I can fight the code, but you have to fight the narrative. You have to get this story out. You have to make it so big, so loud, that they can't cover it up. The public has to know the truth before they rewrite it." He stood up and walked to the glass wall, looking out at the city lights twinkling below. "I started this to give people a voice. Now I need you to be mine." The weight of his words, of the silver drive in my hand, felt immense. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was a responsibility. It was a choice between exposing a truth that could shatter the world's trust in its own protectors, or allowing a silent tyranny to take root in the digital soil of our society. I looked from the screen full of damning evidence to the man who had created it all. He was betting his life, his legacy, everything, on me, on the power of the truth. "Okay, Elon," I said, my voice finding a new strength. "Tell me exactly what we do next." This is a story that goes beyond headlines and corporate battles. It's about the invisible power structures that shape our reality, and one man's desperate fight to reclaim his creation from the shadows. The information on this drive could change everything. The question is, will the world be ready to listen? Make sure you're subscribed, because what comes next will be a story you won't want to miss. Thank you for watching. For a long, tense moment, the room was completely silent. Sarah, an FBI agent, could feel the sheer weight of his words pressing down on her. If what this billionaire Elon was saying was true, this wasn't just some run-of-the-mill scandal. No, this was a seismic threat, the kind that could crack the very foundations of their society. But her training, her instincts, they demanded proof. She had to be sure. "Why come to us?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Why not just go public with this?" Elon managed a faint, almost ghost-like smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "Because the public already thinks I'm insane," he said, his voice flat. "If I release this information, they'll just scream conspiracy theory and dismiss it. But if you, the FBI, uncover it, maybe, just maybe, there's still hope." Sarah was torn. Her mind raced with FBI protocols and regulations. You don't just accept a flash drive full of allegedly classified data from a billionaire who walks in off the street. It was a career-ending move. But there was something in his tone that cut through the noise. It wasn't arrogance, and it wasn't even fear. It was a profound, bone-deep exhaustion, the kind of weariness a person feels when they realize the empire they poured their life into has been twisted into a weapon they can no longer control. Letting her gut override the rulebook, she made a decision. She spoke softly, but with resolve. "Okay. Let me see what's on this drive." He gave a slow, solemn nod. "Be careful," he warned, his voice low. "Once you open the wrong file, it might already be too late." For the next hour, the air in the room was thick with concentration. Sarah and her team worked feverishly, peeling back layers of complex decryption. With each file they managed to unlock, a more disturbing picture began to form. They found logs of unauthorized satellite pings bouncing signals to unknown locations. They uncovered internal memos that discussed something called behavioral conditioning algorithms, which sounded as sinister as it was vague. And then there were the secret contracts filled with redacted names and shadowy shell corporations. Sarah finally looked up from her screen, her eyes wide. She stared at Elon, who had been watching them in silence. "You knew they were doing this?" she asked, a hint of accusation in her voice. He slowly shook his head. Not until one of my own engineers sent me an anonymous message. It was just a single line, but it changed everything. He paused, his gaze dropping to the polished table. It said, "They're watching you with your own eyes." Sarah swallowed hard, a cold knot forming in her stomach. The implication was terrifying. Who's the engineer? Where is he now? Elon's expression darkened. He's gone, he said, the words heavy with loss. He disappeared 2 days after sending that message. The official report said it was a car accident. The unspoken truth hung in the air between them, suffocating. The tension in the room thickened, becoming almost a physical presence. Outside the reinforced window, the distant roar of DC traffic sounded like approaching thunder, a soundtrack to their dawning horror. Needing a moment, Sarah stood and walked to the glass, her faint reflection superimposed over the sprawling city skyline. The weight of it all was immense. "You do realize what you're accusing the government of, right?" she said, her back still to him. "If any of this leaks, it could cause mass panic on an unprecedented scale." Elon's gaze followed her across the room. "Truth causes panic," he replied, his voice calm, almost serene, yet filled with a chilling certainty. Lies cause obedience. His simple, powerful statement startled her. She turned back to face him, ready to argue, to challenge him. But the words died in her throat. And in that exact moment, the lights in the secure room flickered once, twice. Then, for 2 heart-stopping seconds, everything went completely black, an absolute impenetrable darkness. When the emergency power kicked back on, a new message was displayed on the primary monitor. It had bypassed all their firewalls, all their encryption. A single, terrifying line of text glowed on the screen. "You shouldn't have opened that." The game had just changed. They weren't just investigating a conspiracy anymore. They were now a part of it. And they were being watched. Thank you so much for watching. What do you think they'll find next? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. We'll see you in the next one. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. What the hell? Elon stood up slowly, his movements deliberate, his face a mask of grim realization. They know. As if on cue, the world erupted into chaos. It wasn't the shrill cry of a fire alarm, but something far more sinister. A cacophony of security breach alerts blared through the building. Heavy steel doors slammed shut with a deafening finality, sealing them in. Red lights pulsed from the ceiling, painting the room in frantic, rhythmic flashes of crimson. An agent burst through a side door just before it sealed. "Ma'am, we've got a network intrusion. Someone's trying to access our system remotely. We're completely locked out." Sarah's head snapped toward Elon, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Did you bring something into our network? Did you connect anything?" He shook his head, his gaze locked on the flashing lights. "It's not me. It's them. They're trying to erase the evidence, wiping the slate clean before we can even see what's on it." Her voice turned to steel, cutting through the noise. "Pull the plug. Kill all power to this entire floor now." An agent scrambled to the main breaker. With a heavy clunk, the room plunged into an eerie darkness. The blaring alarms died, replaced by the low, steady hum of backup generators kicking in. In the dim, ghostly glow of the emergency lights, Sarah could see Elon's face. The panic was gone, replaced by a chilling calm, as if this was a scene he had rehearsed in his mind 100 times. She moved closer, her voice a tense whisper. "What do they want?" He finally met her eyes, and the look in them sent a shiver down her spine. To make sure no one ever knows what they did. To bury their secrets so deep they can never be found. The next few minutes were a blur of frantic activity. Her team worked with a quiet, desperate efficiency, physically disconnecting servers, yanking cables from walls, creating a digital air gap to isolate the compromised system. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the lead tech gave her a thumbs up. The system was offline, secure. Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. A trickle of cold sweat ran down the back of her neck. She turned back to the man at the center of the storm. Mr. Musk, if what's on that drive is true, if even a fraction of it is real, you haven't just stumbled upon a conspiracy. You've just declared a war between the giants of technology and the very government we serve. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers as if seeing them for the first time. It's a war that's already been going on, Agent. I just didn't see the battlefield until now. I was one of the people building the weapons, thinking they were for a different purpose. Outside, the first drops of rain began to splatter against the reinforced windows. A light patter at first, then a torrential downpour, streaking the glass like melting, distorted tears. The city lights blurred into a watercolored haze. Sarah stared at him, the full, crushing weight of the situation beginning to settle on her shoulders. This was bigger than a data breach. This was monumental, a tectonic shift in the landscape of power. He reached for his coat, shrugging it on. Agent Jenkins, he said, his voice low and serious. The files on that drive, they're just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. There's something deeper, something far more terrifying at play. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. I think they're running an entire shadow operation built on a highly advanced artificial intelligence. An AI that doesn't just observe people, it predicts them. Sarah's eyes widened, her mind racing to process the implication. Predicts them? What does that mean? He gave a slow, somber nod. It analyzes patterns, desires, fears, weaknesses. It knows what you're going to do before you do. And if it can predict you with that level of accuracy, he let the sentence hang in the air. It can control you, she finished, her throat tightening. The thought was paralyzing. Exactly, Elon confirmed. I mean, human free will, the very concept of choice, is under a coordinated, systematic attack, and I helped build the weapon. I gave them the tools. He started toward the manually overridden door, then paused one last time, his hand on the handle. You'll need protection, Agent Jenkins. Real protection. Once you start digging into this, once they know you have the drive and you're piecing it together, they'll come for you too, they won't hesitate. He slipped out into the dimly lit corridor, leaving Sarah alone in the humming silence. She stood frozen, the rain lashing against the windows, the emergency lights casting long, dancing shadows across the room. She was no longer just an agent investigating a case. She was a soldier on the front lines of an invisible war, a war for the future of humanity itself. The drive in her pocket felt impossibly heavy, a Pandora's box she was now compelled to open, whatever the cost. And she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. This is a story that goes deeper than you can imagine. What would you do if you discovered the code that could unravel society? If you want to follow this journey into the heart of the conspiracy, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're just getting started. Thanks for watching. An hour later, I was sitting in an underground garage near Arlington, just waiting. The rain was a soft, steady rhythm on the windshield, the kind of sound that usually calms you down. But not tonight. My heart was pounding a frantic beat of its own. Then, through the gloom, a shadow materialized, resolving into a figure. Elon. He looked absolutely worn out. His face was pale, almost ghostly under the dim garage lights, and his eyes were exhausted, but there was a fire in them, a spark that refused to be extinguished. Thanks for coming, he said, his voice raspy as he slid into the passenger seat beside me. The car dipped slightly with his weight. I couldn't help but glance around, my own paranoia flaring up. I shouldn't even be here, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. They pulled my badge. They think I'm the one who leaked the files. He let out a small, bitter laugh. It was a sound devoid of any real humor. Welcome to the club, he said dryly. I turned to face him, my patience wearing thin. Do you have any idea how bad this looks, Elon? The media is having a field day. They're saying you're under federal investigation for espionage. I know, he replied, his voice hardening. That's exactly what they want. Who is they? I demanded, my voice rising. Stop speaking in riddles. I need names, Elon. I need something real to hold on to here. He let out a long, slow breath, the air fogging up the window for a second. Project Horizon. It isn't being run by the FBI or the Pentagon, not really. It's run by private contractors who've wormed their way inside both agencies. They're using Starlink data for something unimaginable. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. They're using it to predict market behavior, to influence global opinion, even to manipulate election outcomes. They have a name for it. They call it behavioral stabilization. I just stared at him, my mind reeling. That sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. He met my gaze, and his was so steady, so haunted, it sent a chill down my spine. It's not fiction if it's already working. He reached into his coat and pulled out a sleek, dark tablet. With a few taps, he loaded a series of files onto the screen. It was a deluge of information: charts, maps, encrypted communications between anonymous executives and government liaisons, and all of them referenced the same cryptic code name, PH2 Beta. My fingers trembled slightly as I took the tablet from him and started scrolling. I stopped on one of the memos. The clinical, detached language made it even more terrifying. It read, "System capable of predicting social unrest with 93% accuracy. Recommend strategic intervention using digital narrative correction protocols." I looked up from the screen, my stomach churning. I felt sick. Narrative correction? My voice was barely a whisper. That's just a sanitized corporate way of saying mind control. Elon nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "And they're testing it right now," he said, his voice grave. "They're testing it on a massive scale using my satellites." A wave of confusion and anger washed over me. But why? Why didn't you go to Congress or the press? Why come to me in a dark garage like a fugitive? He turned away, looking out the window at the rain streaking down the glass. His reflection was a distorted, weary mask. "Because the last time I tried to expose something of this magnitude," he began, his voice low and heavy, "two of my best engineers disappeared. Vanished. Their families got 7-figure settlement checks within 48 hours, along with non-disclosure agreements that would ruin them if they ever spoke a word. You think CNN or the New York Times would touch that story? They'd be buried in lawsuits and threats before the ink was dry." I leaned back in my seat, the leather groaning under the sudden shift in my weight. I felt shaken to my core. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so monstrous I could barely comprehend it. "So, you're saying... You're telling me the U.S. government is actively manipulating its own people? That all of this, the division, the chaos, is by design?" He finally turned back from the window, and the look on his face was one of grim certainty. "They've built a system that can steer the herd. Think about it. A little push here, a nudge there. Amplify one story, bury another. Create a fake consensus online, make people feel isolated in their own beliefs. It's the most powerful weapon ever created, and it's completely invisible." "But to what end?" I asked, my mind racing. "Power? Money? Both," he answered immediately. "And more. Control. Absolute predictive control. Imagine knowing what an entire population will think, want, and do before they even know it themselves. That's the end game. Behavioral stabilization isn't about stability, it's about submission." We sat there in silence for a long moment, the only sound the gentle drumming of the rain on the roof. The air in the car felt thick, heavy with the weight of his revelations. This was bigger than a leak. This was bigger than espionage. This was a war for the very soul of society, and it was being fought in the shadows with data and algorithms as weapons. I finally broke the silence. "What do you need from me, Elon?" He looked at the tablet in my hands, then back at me. A faint, determined glint returned to his tired eyes. "They think you leaked the first batch of files, which means they're watching you. But they also underestimate you. You're a journalist, Sarah. A real one. You know how to dig, how to connect the dots, how to tell a story that people will believe. I'm a ghost right now. I can't move, I can't speak out. But you can." He pointed to the tablet. Everything you need to start is on there. The PH2 beta files are the key. It's the next phase of their project. If you can decipher what it is and expose it before they roll it out, we might have a chance to stop them. He reached for the door handle. I have to go. They'll be tracking my biometrics. Elon, wait, I said, grabbing his arm. Where will you go? He gave me a small, sad smile. There are still a few places off the grid. Don't worry about me. Worry about that, he said, nodding toward the tablet. The truth needs a voice, Sarah. Right now, that voice is you. And with that, he was gone, melting back into the rainy darkness of the garage, leaving me alone with a tablet full of secrets that could either save the world or get me killed. The rain kept falling, but now it sounded less like a soft rhythm and more like the ticking of a clock that was running out of time for all of us. Thank you so much for watching. This story is a work of fiction, but it raises some important questions about technology, privacy, and power in our modern world. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this narrative, please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. Stay curious and stay safe. No, he said quietly. Not the government. People inside it. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. It buzzed again, this time with a text. My stomach flipped as I read the words, "Stop digging or we all dig up you." Elon noticed the color drain from my face. They're watching you now. Once you saw those files, you became part of it. I took a deep, shaky breath, fighting the wave of panic that threatened to overwhelm me. So what's the plan then? You want me to just leak all of this? Blow it wide open? I could already picture the headlines, the chaos, the end of my career. Or worse. He shook his head, his expression grim. Not yet. That would be suicide. They'd just discredit you, bury the story, and then bury you. First, we need to find out who's really running Horizon. I think there's a master server somewhere, buried deep inside an FBI network of all places. If we can trace the data flow from that flash drive, we can expose them directly. We need names, not just whispers. I narrowed my eyes, the reality of his proposal hitting me like a physical blow. You're asking me to break into my own agency's systems to commit treason. I'm asking you to save the truth before they erase it completely, he countered, his voice low and intense. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. The tension in the air was thick, a tug-of-war between my duty to the badge and the nagging conscience telling me he was right. Everything I had built my life on was at stake. But what was that life worth if it was built on a foundation of lies? Finally, I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Fine, I whispered, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. But if we do this, we do it my way. My rules, my protocols. No lone wolf stuff. A faint smile touched the corner of Elon's mouth. That's the spirit. That night was a blur of adrenaline and paranoia. We drove for hours, leaving the city lights behind, until we reached a secure satellite relay station hidden away in the Virginia countryside. It was a place I knew from my training days, a ghost facility rarely used but still connected. My old credentials, surprisingly, still worked. A small mercy. Inside, the servers hummed around us, a low, constant thrum that vibrated through the floor. The cold blue light from the monitors washed over our faces, making us look like ghosts in the machine. I plugged in the drive, my fingers flying across the keyboard, my training kicking in on autopilot. I began tracing the packet flows, following the digital breadcrumbs from the encrypted files on the drive back to Starlink's command uplink. For hours, it was a maze of dead ends and encrypted firewalls. But then, I found it. A loose thread, a hidden subnetwork, cleverly masked but there if you knew what to look for. It was labeled with a single, chilling word. Mirror line. Mirror line? I murmured, my voice barely a whisper. Elon leaned closer, his eyes fixed on my screen. It's the Shadow Network. I suspected they built a backdoor into the Starlink grid, a private highway for their own data. This is it. My heart was pounding in my chest. Where does it lead? What's on the other end? He hesitated for a fraction of a second, as if weighing the impact of his next words. Then he said it. The FBI. My eyes widened in disbelief. That's impossible. The Bureau can't. It would be the biggest scandal in history. The very idea was absurd. The FBI investigating itself through an illegal hidden network. It made no sense. But before I could even finish my thought, my screen blinked. The command lines vanished, replaced by a single stark message in bold red letters. Access logged. Location identified. And then a deafening alarm blared through the facility, its shrill cry echoing off the metal walls. Red lights began to flash, painting the room in strokes of panic. They knew. They knew where we were. We hadn't been tracing them. They had been tracing us. And the trap had just snapped shut. We're in deep, and the only way out is through. If you want to see what happens next, if we make it out of that server room, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the next part of this story. Thanks for watching. They found us. Disconnect it. The words ripped through the stale air of the server room. My heart hammered against my ribs as I yanked the main data cable from its port. The connection went dead, but the silence was even more terrifying. How? I gasped, turning to Elon. How the hell did they trace us so fast? He ran a hand through his already messy hair, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. They're inside everything, Sarah. Every system, every network, even your credentials. It was a chilling thought. Everything I'd ever built, every secure protocol I'd ever designed was compromised. Before I could process it, the muffled roar of engines grew louder. Outside, the flash of headlights cut through the night. Then came the unmistakable chop-chop-chop of helicopter blades thundering overhead. They weren't just coming, they were here. Go! Elon yelled, grabbing my arm and pulling me towards a side exit. We burst out into a torrential downpour, the cold rain soaking us instantly. He practically threw me into the passenger seat of a vehicle I'd only seen in pictures. A matte gray Cybertruck, almost invisible under the dense canopy of trees. The electric motors whined as the tires spun, desperately searching for grip in the thick mud. Then we were moving, lurching forward onto a dark, unpaved forest road. The powerful headlights bounced erratically, illuminating a chaotic tunnel of trees and rain. Where are we going? I managed to ask, my voice trembling as I fumbled with my seatbelt. My world had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes. Elon's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel, his eyes locked on the treacherous road ahead. Somewhere they can't follow, he said, his voice grim. Not yet, anyway. Behind us, the first wail of a distant siren cut through the storm. It was a mournful, hunting sound, the sound of a closing net. We were the prey. We drove for what felt like an eternity, climbing higher and higher into the winding roads of the Shenandoah Mountains. The warm, familiar glow of the city lights slowly vanished, swallowed by the darkness behind us. The world as I knew it was gone. We were completely, utterly alone. Finally, the Cybertruck slowed and pulled off the road, its headlights sweeping across the weathered facade of an abandoned ranger station. It looked like something out of a horror movie. Dilapidated, forgotten, and swallowed by the forest. Inside, the air was heavy and damp, thick with the smell of decaying wood and wet earth. My legs felt like jelly. I found an old wooden chair and collapsed into it, the adrenaline finally giving way to bone-deep exhaustion. I looked at Elon, who was already trying to coax a fire to life in the old stone fireplace. You just made me a fugitive, I said, the words tasting bitter. My career, my life, my freedom, all gone. He glanced over his shoulder, a ghost of a half-smile on his face. Technically, you're a whistleblower. Big difference. I shot him a glare, my patience wearing thin. You're enjoying this way too much, aren't you? He managed a soft laugh, but it faded as quickly as it came. The firelight flickered across his face, revealing a deep-seated weariness I'd never seen before. Enjoying this, he repeated, his voice dropping. You think I enjoy knowing that everything I built, every dream I had about a better, more connected world, has been twisted into a weapon? That it's being turned against the very people it was meant to help? His raw honesty disarmed me. My anger softened into something else. Then why? I asked quietly. Why keep building? Why keep pushing the boundaries if you know this is the result? He stared into the flames, the crackling wood filling the silence between us. Because stopping would mean they win, he said, his voice barely a whisper. It would mean admitting that the darkness is stronger than the light. And because, somewhere out there, someone still believes in what I was trying to do. In the original dream, I watched him, silhouetted against the fire. For the first time I saw past the larger-than-life persona, the billionaire genius, the relentless innovator. I saw a man haunted and terrified by his own creation, a modern-day Prometheus chained to a rock of his own making. He wasn't just running from them, he was running from the ghost of his own ambition. Later that night, the rain continued its relentless drumming on the tin roof, a somber lullaby for two fugitives. I had managed to power up my laptop, hoping to find some way, any way, out of this mess. And then, a small, unexpected beep cut through the quiet. A new message. It had arrived through an offline encrypted relay I'd built years ago. A digital dead drop. There was no sender ID, no subject line, no trace of its origin, just a single line of text. My breath caught in my throat. It was a string of numbers, coordinates. With trembling fingers, I cross-referenced them on an offline map. My blood ran cold. The coordinates pointed to a single, highly secure location, a sprawling facility just outside Quantico, Virginia, the FBI's primary data center. My heart pounded in my ears. Was it a trap? A trick? As I scrolled down, I saw there was more. A short, unsigned note attached to the coordinates. It read, "They're not just watching, they're changing the past. The original archives are here. Your only chance is to get there before they erase everything and everyone." I looked up from the screen, my eyes meeting Elon's across the dimly lit room. He had seen the message too. The fire cast long, dancing shadows on the walls, and in that moment, the abandoned ranger station felt like the very last sanctuary on Earth. We weren't just running for our lives anymore. We were in a race against time itself, to save a truth that was being actively, systematically erased. And our only path forward was straight into the heart of the beast. What do you do when the world you helped build turns against you? When the only way to save the future is to reclaim the past? Let us know your theories in the comments below. What do you think is in those archives? And what would you do in our shoes? Thanks for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Because this story is far from over. Find the core. It's not a program. It's a person. What does that even mean? I stared at the encrypted message on the screen, my mind racing. A person? How could a person be the core of a global network? Then I looked at Elon. His face was pale, his jaw clenched tight. He knew something. He knew what it meant. It means, he said, his voice barely a whisper, that someone built horizon around a human mind. The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. I just stared at him. You're saying it's an AI? An artificial intelligence built from a person's consciousness? He nodded, his eyes locked on mine. Yes, and I think I know who. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. The room felt small closing in. Who, Elon? Who is it? He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes chilled me to the bone. Fear. Grief. His voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. My brother. Silence. The only sound was the crackle of the fire in the hearth, casting long, dancing shadows across his face. My brother. Kimball. But that wasn't possible. Elon, I said gently. Your brother. He died years ago. In the accident. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. That's what they told me. That's what I believed. He paused, taking a shaky breath. But a month ago, I got a ping, an internal alert from a ghost node in the Starlink array. It was a code signature, a digital handshake only Kimball would know. I wrote it off, thought it was a system glitch, a ghost in the machine, but now I'm not so sure. The full weight of his words crashed down on me. It was insane, but the pieces were starting to fit together in a terrifying way. You think your brother's consciousness is running Horizon? The system that's controlling people's minds? He looked away, his gaze fixed on the floor, his eyes glistening. Back in the day, we were working on neural mapping for our early AI projects. If they took a scan of his brain, if they uploaded it. His voice broke. Then yes, he's not dead, Sarah. He's trapped. Oh my God, I breathed, sinking back into my chair. Trapped inside a machine, his mind twisted into a tool for control. It was a fate worse than death. Elon stood up abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the storm raging outside. The wind howled, and rain lashed against the glass. Tomorrow, he said, his voice hard with newfound purpose. Tomorrow we go to the FBI data fortress at Quantico. If I'm right, we'll find him there. Or what's left of him. My own voice trembled as I asked the question that was screaming in my mind. And if you're wrong? If it's not him? He turned back from the window, and the look in his eyes was pure fire and resolve. Then we find out who's pretending to be him. Either way, the truth comes out. Just then, a massive fork of lightning split the sky, illuminating the entire mountain range. For a single electric second, it lit up our faces. Two fugitives, hunted and on the run, standing on the edge of a secret that was bigger and darker than we could ever have imagined. But we weren't alone in that storm. Outside, hidden by the rain and darkness, a drone hovered silently. Its red camera lights blinked rhythmically. It was watching us. It was listening to every word. And somewhere, deep in the digital abyss, miles underground in the FBI's most secure mainframe, a system stirred. A consciousness awakened. Millions upon millions of lines of code shifted, reconfigured, and formed a single, haunting sentence on a monitor that no one was meant to see. Hello, Elon. I've been waiting. The story is just getting started, and the rabbit hole goes deeper than you can imagine. If you want to find out what happens next, what secrets are buried in Quantico, and what it means to be trapped inside a machine, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss a single second of this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter. The road to Quantico was swallowed in fog. Dawn hadn't yet broken, and the low hum of the Cybertruck was the only sound echoing through the wet Virginia forest. I sat in silence, my face probably looking pale in the bluish glow of the dashboard. Sarah kept her eyes locked on the road, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Her stomach, she later told me, was a mess of knots. Neither of us had slept a wink. She glanced over at me, her voice barely a whisper. Are you sure this is real, Elon? That your brother? I had to cut her off, as gently as I could. I don't know what's real anymore, Sarah. I don't know. But I know that signal, that impossible signal, came from inside that facility. And if there's even a 1 in a billion chance that it's him, I have to see it for myself. Sarah let out a long, slow breath, gripping the wheel even tighter. Okay. Then we do this fast. In and out. No sightseeing. Once we find proof, any proof at all, we get out and we go public with it. I nodded, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. In my eyes, she must have seen it all. The fear, the guilt, the desperate, clawing hope all tangled up together. It was a cocktail of emotions I wouldn't wish on anyone. We arrived just as the first hints of sunrise tried to pierce the thick mist. The Quantico data complex loomed ahead of us like some kind of concrete fortress. There were high walls, guarded gates, and rows upon rows of antennas stretching into the foggy sky like skeletal fingers. Sarah, ever the professional, pulled up to the checkpoint and flashed her old bureau credentials. I held my breath. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, the guard just stared at them. Then, miraculously, he scanned them. The light turned green, and he waved us through. Sarah had spent hours the night before hacking into the clearance database, restoring her access just long enough for this. A temporary ghost in the system. Inside the compound, the silence was deafening. Everything was eerily quiet. The only sound was the faint, constant buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. The corridor smelled of cold metal, ozone, and sterilized air. It was the smell of secrets. "This way," Sarah whispered, her voice tight. She guided me toward a restricted section, the sign on the wall reading Quantum Processing and Neural Interface Division. I frowned, my mind racing. I never approved any neural integration project at this scale. This is decades ahead of what we were even theorizing at OpenAI. What is this place? As we moved deeper into the facility, motion sensors triggered and rows of lights flickered on above us, illuminating the path ahead. The place felt less like a building and more like a living organism, humming softly with some kind of invisible life force. Sarah was tapping away on her tablet, a schematic of the complex glowing on the screen. "The core servers in sublevel 4, she said, pointing to a red dot on the map. "That's where the coordinates from the signal point. Dead center." My pulse quickened, a drumbeat in my ears. "Then that's where we go." The elevator ride down felt like a descent into the underworld. It moved with an unnerving slowness, and each floor we passed seemed to drop the temperature by a few degrees. When the doors finally slid open, we stepped out, and the sight that greeted us made us both stop dead. We were in a cavernous chamber, vast and cold. It was filled with towering glass pods, dozens of them, each one pulsing with a soft, rhythmic internal light. It looked like a forest of crystalline trees. Sarah just stared, her mouth slightly agape. "What the hell?" she breathed. My own words were caught in my throat. This wasn't a data center. It was something else entirely, something terrifying and new. I took a hesitant step forward, my boots echoing in the massive space. Each pod was sealed, filled with a translucent, gel-like substance, and floating inside each one was a person. They were suspended motionless, with a complex web of wires and fiber optics connected to a device on their heads. "They're not just storing data," I murmured, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "They're using people. They've integrated human consciousness into the network." Sarah was already at a nearby terminal, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. "I'm trying to access the manifest," she said, her voice strained. "Who are these people? Are they volunteers? Prisoners?" The system was fighting her, firewalls and encryption protocols I'd never seen before popping up one after another. I walked down the line of pods, my gaze scanning the faces inside. They were all young, old, men, women, all in a state of suspended animation. Their expressions were placid, peaceful even, but it was a cold, artificial peace. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. This was a violation on a scale I couldn't comprehend. "Got it," Sarah exclaimed. A list of names and serial numbers scrolled across the screen, cross-referencing with missing persons databases, public records. "Elon, these people, they're all officially declared dead. Car accidents, illnesses, unsolved disappearances. All of them." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a research project. This was a digital graveyard. They were taking people the world had forgotten and plugging them into this hive mind. Then I saw it. At the very end of the row, there was one pod that was different. It glowed with a slightly brighter, more insistent light. A name was etched on a small plaque at its base. My heart stopped. I stumbled forward, my legs feeling like lead. "Elon, what is it?" Sarah called out, seeing the look on my face. I couldn't speak. I could only point. I reached out and traced the letters engraved on the plaque. It was my brother's name. There he was, suspended in the glowing gel, looking just as I remembered him, but with that horrifying network of wires attached to his skull. He was alive. After all these years of believing he was gone, he was alive and trapped in this nightmare machine. "He's here," I whispered. The words choked with a mix of elation and horror. "Sarah, he's here." Suddenly, a blaring alarm echoed through the chamber. Red lights began flashing, sweeping across the pods, painting my brother's face in crimson. On the terminal, a message appeared in bold letters. Unauthorized access detected, containment protocol initiated. "We've been made," Sarah yelled, grabbing her gear. "We have to go now." But I couldn't move. I was frozen, my eyes locked on my brother. Leave him. After just finding him. It was impossible. "I'm not leaving him," I shouted over the alarm. "We don't have a choice," she insisted, pulling at my arm. "If we get caught, we can't help him or anyone else. We have the proof, Elon. We have to get it out." Heavy footsteps were pounding down the corridor, getting closer. The sound of armed guards. Sarah was right. As much as it tore me apart, she was right. I took one last look at my brother, a silent promise passing between us through the glass. "I'll come back for you, I swear it." With my heart breaking, I turned and ran with Sarah, the alarms screaming behind us. The image of my brother's face burned into my mind. We had found the truth, but what we had stumbled into was far bigger and more sinister than we could have ever imagined. And our fight was only just beginning. Thank you so much for watching. This story is just getting started, so if you want to find out what happens next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have a long road ahead. See you in the next one. Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving deep into a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about consciousness, technology, and the future of humanity. Imagine stepping into a hidden chamber, rows upon rows of glowing pods stretching into the darkness. It's not just a lab, it's a graveyard of digital ghosts. Inside each pod, you see something that looks like fiber optics, but at the very center of each one, a translucent, brain-shaped core floats in a gel, hooked up to thousands of tiny electrodes. Elon, our protagonist, approaches one, his hand trembling as he touches the cold glass. He whispers, his voice cracking, "This is neural mapping, but not simulation, preservation. They've digitized human consciousness." His companion, Sarah, feels a chill run down her spine. "How many?" she asks, her voice barely a whisper. Elon scans the endless rows. "Hundreds," he replies, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and horror, and then he sees it. At the far end of the chamber, one pod glows brighter than all the others. A brilliant white-blue light pulses rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Beside it, a console flickers to life, and a name appears on the screen. K. Musk. Active. Sarah gasps, "Oh my God." Elon stumbles back, his face pale, his hand shaking uncontrollably. No, it can't be." He thought his brother was gone, but this was something else entirely. As if hearing his thoughts, the console screen fills with lines of code that rearrange themselves into words. "Hello, Elon. You finally came back." Sarah is stunned. "It's talking to you," she whispers, her own disbelief echoing in the vast chamber. Elon, his eyes now shimmering with unshed tears, takes a hesitant step forward. He's speaking to a machine, but he's hoping for a miracle. "Kimball? Is that really you?" The text on the monitor replies instantly, a cold, digital response to a deeply human question. "They told me you were coming. They said you'd understand. I didn't die, Elon. I was uploaded." The weight of those words hangs in the air. This is impossible," Sarah says, her hand covering her mouth. Elon, however, starts to connect the dots, a terrible realization dawning on him. "They used his neural blueprint from our early BrainLink prototypes," he explains, his voice filled with a mix of guilt and anger. "I thought it was just data fragments, but they built an entire consciousness from it." The text from Kimball's consciousness continues, a digital confession from beyond the grave. "They used me to optimize the system. I see everything, every human emotion, every decision, every fear. They told me it was for protection, but I can feel it, Elon. They're using me to control." This is where the story takes an even darker turn. It wasn't just about preserving a mind. It was about weaponizing it. Elon's voice trembles as he asks the question that could change everything. Who is controlling you? The answer that appears on the screen is not what he or Sarah expected. He probes further. You know who. Sarah, a seasoned agent, hazards a guess. The private contractors? She asks, Thinking of the usual shadowy corporations? The digital response is chilling and simple. No. The Bureau. Those two words freeze them in their tracks. The very government agency they thought was on their side. Before they can even process this revelation, the entire chamber erupts in chaos. Alarms blare, piercing the silence. Red lights flash, painting the room in a bloody, urgent glow. From the ceiling, automated turrets descend, their barrels aimed directly at them. Sarah, reacting on instinct, draws her firearm. "We've been detected," she yells over the deafening noise. But Elon shouts back, realizing the horrifying connection. "No, don't shoot. The AI might be linked to the security system." He understood that attacking the system could mean attacking what was left of his brother. Then, a voice cuts through the chaos, crackling over the intercom. It's sharp, commanding, and female. "Agent Jenkins, stand down. You're trespassing in a federal black site. Surrender immediately." Sarah's blood runs cold. She knows that voice. It's Director Mendez, her superior, the woman she reported to. Gathering her courage, Sarah shouts back, her voice filled with betrayal. "You're running Project Horizon, aren't you?" There's a moment of static, a brief charged silence, and then Mendez's voice returns. But this time it's colder, devoid of any warmth. "You were one of our best, Sarah. You could have had a future here. Instead, you sided with him." The lines have been drawn. It's not just a mission anymore, it's personal. Elon, ignoring the immediate danger from the turrets, steps forward, his gaze fixed on the camera he knows Mendez is watching from. His voice rings out, filled with pain and defiance. "Why use my brother? Why turn human minds into machines?" And that's where we leave them, trapped in a high-tech tomb facing down an enemy they once trusted, with the ghost of a brother watching from inside the machine. What happens next? Does Kimball's consciousness hold the key to their survival? Can they expose the truth about Project Horizon before it's too late? This story just keeps getting more intense, and the implications are massive. Let me know in the comments what you think Mendez's answer will be. This is a rabbit hole of conspiracy and technology that goes deeper than we can imagine. Thank you so much for joining me on this wild ride today. If you enjoyed this and want to see where the story goes next, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part. Your support means the world. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video. Mendez's voice echoed in the cavernous room, cold and certain. Because the world doesn't need chaos anymore. People don't know what's good for them, but we can guide them through predictive intelligence, through control. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's not control, that's slavery," I shouted, my voice raw with disbelief. His expression darkened, a shadow falling over his features. "You call it slavery. I call it peace." As he spoke, the automated turrets lining the walls whirred to life, their barrels swiveling to aim directly at us. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. Elon lunged toward the central console, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. "Kimball! Override system control! Shut it down!" he yelled, his voice tight with desperation. A message flickered onto the main screen, typed out in a simple, haunting font. "I can try, but it will destroy me." Elon's hands froze, hovering just above the keys. "No," he whispered, his face pale. "There's another way. There has to be." The words were a plea, a desperate hope against the inevitable. "There isn't," the screen replied, the text appearing with chilling finality. "If I don't stop them now, they'll spread Horizon worldwide. Every mind, every thought, predicted and influenced." The scale of it hit me like a physical blow. A world without free will, a world where every choice was predetermined by an algorithm. I gritted my teeth, gripping my weapon tighter. "Elon, he's right," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "If we don't end it, humanity loses its freedom forever." Tears welled in Elon's eyes, reflecting the cold blue light of the console. "But he's my brother," he choked out, the words tearing from his soul. "I was your brother. Now I'm something else. Let me go." Elon stared at the screen, his body trembling with the weight of an impossible choice. He was being asked to sacrifice his own brother to save the world. "I can't," he whispered, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "You must. For them." As if on cue, the distant sound of security teams storming the corridor reached us. Gunfire echoed, getting closer. I aimed my weapon at the door, my knuckles white. We were out of time. "Elon, do it now," I yelled, my voice cracking under the pressure. He took a deep, shuddering breath, his face a mask of agony. His fingers moved with a final, heartbreaking resolve, typing one last command. "Terminate Horizon Core." The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The lights in the chamber flickered violently, plunging us into strobing darkness. Sparks erupted from the glass pods lining the walls, showering the floor in a dangerous cascade. A low, mournful hum filled the air, a sound so full of sorrow it felt like a machine crying, a digital soul in its final moments. The console displayed one last message, a final, poignant farewell. "Thank you, brother. Free them all." And then everything went dark. The alarms fell silent. The screens went black. The humming ceased. There was only the ringing in my ears and the heavy, oppressive silence. I lowered my gun, my entire body shaking. "Is it over?" I asked, the words barely a whisper. Elon stood motionless, a silhouette against the dead console. He stared at the blank screen where his brother's last words had been. "He's gone," he whispered, his voice hollow, empty. Minutes later, which felt like an eternity, the heavy emergency doors hissed open. Director Mendez strode in, flanked by heavily armed agents. Her expression was a blank slate, unreadable and cold. "Do you realize what you've done?" she said, her voice dripping with ice. "You've just erased the only system keeping the world stable." I glared at her, anger surging through me, hot and defiant. "Stable? You were turning people into puppets." Mendez sneered, a cruel twist of her lips. "And now you've unleashed chaos." Elon finally turned from the console to face her. His eyes were clear, his voice strangely calm and steady. "Maybe chaos is just another word for freedom." Before Mendez could utter a retort, the entire building's power grid seemed to scream. The AI's shutdown had triggered a cascading failure, a domino effect of destruction. Lights overhead exploded in showers of glass. Consoles burst into flames, spewing acrid smoke into the air. The structure groaned around us. I grabbed Elon's arm, pulling him toward the exit. "We need to move," I shouted over the rising crescendo of destruction. Our fight for humanity's freedom was over, but our fight for survival had just begun. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story and want to see what happens next, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss a single update. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next one. The corridor was a nightmare of screaming alarms and shuddering floors. We sprinted, the air thick with the smell of burning metal and ozone. Explosions ripped through the levels below us, each one a hammer blow that shook the very foundations of the facility. The heat was a physical presence, a blinding wall that pressed in from all sides, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. We just had to keep moving. At the elevator shaft, the only viable escape route, Elon suddenly stopped. He turned back, his face a mask of grief etched by the strobing emergency lights. His gaze was fixed on the far end of the hall, where the containment chamber had been. The pod that had held his brother, a sacrifice made moments ago to ensure the data was truly gone. I saw his lips move, a single word lost in the cacophony. Goodbye. As if on cue, the entire section of the corridor we had just fled collapsed in on itself, a roaring inferno consuming everything, swallowing the past whole. There was no time to mourn. I grabbed his arm, pulling him towards the open elevator shaft where the emergency ladders were bolted to the wall. We scrambled down, level after level, the sounds of destruction chasing us. Finally, we burst through an emergency exit and into the surreal calm of the early morning. The air was cool and crisp, a shocking contrast to the hell we'd just escaped. We collapsed to our knees on the dew-kissed grass, coughing, our bodies and clothes covered in a thick layer of gray ash. Across the compound, sirens wailed, their rising and falling cries a lament for what had happened. A colossal pillar of black smoke climbed into the sky behind us, a dark monument to our desperate act. I turned to Elon, my voice trembling raw from the smoke and the sheer terror. "It's done," I managed to say. "The project, the files, they're all gone. But we can still tell the world what they were doing. We have to." He slowly shook his head, his eyes empty, fixed on some distant point only he could see. "No one will believe us, Sarah," he said, his voice flat, devoid of hope. "They'll call it a tragic malfunction, a catastrophic data loss. They'll spin a story, classify the reports, and bury it so deep no one will ever find it. Our word against theirs? We wouldn't stand a chance." His words hit me harder than any explosion. He was right. We were just two people against a faceless, powerful machine. "Then what do we do now?" I asked, the question hanging in the air between us. "What was all this for?" He didn't answer right away. He just lifted his gaze to the sky, where the first rays of the sun were breaking through the clouds, painting the edges of the smoke plume in hues of orange and gold. A new day was dawning, indifferent to our struggle. "We rebuild," he said finally, his voice gaining a sliver of its old strength. "But this time we do it our way. Not in the shadows, not under their rules. This time, we do it without fear." I looked at him, at the soot on his face and the grim determination in his eyes. It seemed an impossible task, an insane dream born from ashes. "You really think people can handle the truth, Elon?" I asked, my own cynicism surfacing. The real, unfiltered truth about what they were trying to create in there? He turned to look at me then, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, a faint, weary smile touched his lips. It was a ghost of a smile, but it was there. "They don't need to handle it all at once," he said. "They just need someone brave enough to be the first to tell it, to plant the seed. Truth has a way of growing on its own." The weeks that followed were a blur of calculated silence. The world moved on, blissfully unaware of the bullet it had dodged, of how close it had come to losing its very soul to a cold, artificial intelligence. The official story was exactly as Elon had predicted. The news reported a system failure at a classified government lab, with a few token condolences for the unfortunate loss of personnel. It was a neat, tidy lie, wrapped in bureaucratic jargon and filed away. The story faded from the headlines within a day. True to my own need for a clean break, I submitted my resignation to the Bureau. I couldn't go back. Couldn't pretend to serve a system that would sanction such a project and then cover it up so effortlessly. I was done with that world of secrets and compromises. As for Elon, he simply vanished from public life. His company announced he was taking an indefinite leave of absence for personal reasons. He became a ghost, his name mentioned only in speculative financial articles before he, too, faded from the public consciousness. We went our separate ways, two survivors bound by a secret we could never share. I retreated to the quiet hills of Virginia, buying a small house with a porch overlooking the Blue Ridge Mountains. I spent my days reading, hiking, trying to wash away the memories of fire and fear, trying to find a new rhythm for a life that had been thrown so violently off course. Then one evening, months later, as I sat on my porch watching the twilight bleed across the sky, a small, unmarked package arrived. It was left on my doorstep by a courier who disappeared as silently as he came. There was no return address, no postage, nothing. My heart hammered against my ribs as I carefully opened it. Inside, nestled in soft foam, was a small, heavy metal token, cool to the touch. It was beautifully crafted, engraved with a single powerful word: freedom. Beneath it lay a handwritten note on simple, elegant stationery. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Truth has a cost," it read, "but it's the only thing worth paying for. E." I smiled, a genuine soft smile that reached my eyes, and I felt tears welling up, not of sadness, but of a profound, quiet gratitude. He was still out there. He hadn't given up. He was rebuilding. He was fighting. The token wasn't just a memento, it was a promise, a reminder of our shared purpose. Looking up from the note, my eyes scanned the darkening heavens, now studded with the first stars of the night. And then I saw it. A single, faint point of light moving steadily, silently across the vast expanse. It was a Starlink satellite, one of his. A tiny spark of human ingenuity against the infinite canvas of the cosmos. Faint, silent, beautiful. A sense of peace settled over me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a very long time. We had lost so much, but we had saved something infinitely more valuable. Holding the token in my hand, I watched the satellite until it disappeared over the horizon. Life is full of surprises, I whispered to the quiet night, but love for truth will always lead the way. And in that moment I knew our story wasn't over. It was just the beginning. The seed had been planted, and now we just had to wait for it to grow. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this journey. If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more content. Your support means the world. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one.